Good morning. My name is Ben Graber. I'm the Director of Children's and Youth Ministry here. I'm glad to be here today with all the youth. We arrived back from our trip on Thursday night, and I'm here with Ali. It was a pleasure to get to know Ali. He is Alicia Maldonado Saura's brother-in-law, if you know her, and it was just a pleasure to be with these youth and to be on this pilgrimage. So we're going to share a little bit here to start off, and then the other youth will also have something to share. But to tell you a little bit about a pilgrimage, the difference between a learning tour or just a learning trip, the pilgrimage is an experience. We walk with others, we experience, we bear witness to what it is that we learn. And so it's a wonderful idea as a Christian. And that's exactly what we did. You can see a bit of the trip that it was there. 2 full days of traveling, 12 hours down more or less, 12 hours up. But we went down to Jackson, Mississippi, then Philadelphia, Mississippi, Meridian, Mississippi, into Alabama and Montgomery, or Selma, and then Montgomery as our last destination. You'll see some of our youth and leaders wearing a Just Peace pilgrimage shirt from Mennonite Mission Network. And you can keep it on that slide. And I'm so thankful to Mennonite Mission Network and the work that they're doing, making these types of pilgrimages possible. So we know that God nudges. We know that God is at work. We know that God transforms. And we kind of use this as a way to model our time of sharing today. When we look at this passage, this was our theme passage for our whole trip. We kept hearing again and again about this story of the persistent widow and what stood out. And we know that there's this theme of not fearing. That widow was not afraid to knock on that judge's door over and over again. And from many of the people we heard, you'll hear, I think, from some of the youth, what stood out. Many of the people who spoke into the civil rights movement, there was some fear. There's fear. But they chose to be not afraid, to continue the walk and the fight. So I asked Ali to specifically share a little bit of his thoughts on what he appreciated about the pilgrimage and what stayed with him, kind of the opportunity that he had to participate. So he'll share, and then some of our youth will also share a little bit about how they connected some of our experiences with this scripture passage and some of their perceptions.
It's really nice to meet all of y'all. Let me start off by saying I'm very grateful for having the opportunity, privilege, and honor to go on this pilgrimage. One of the biggest things I appreciate is seeing the truth about all the pain that Black people have gone through. During this pilgrimage, there was so much to take in. It was hard sometimes due to all the brutality. The most impactful thing was realizing what I had learned was the bare minimum. White people enslaved Black people and didn't give them their basic needs, but it was more horrific than that. White people enslaved Black people. White people enslaved Black people and didn't give them their basic needs, but it was more horrific than that. Black people were lynched for no reason at all and for any reason. A couple of examples are a Black man was lynched for suing a white man who killed his cow. A Black man was lynched for defending his daughter from being sexually assaulted by a white man. These are just a couple of examples of the gruesome violence the Black community endured during the civil rights era. I have realized that there's always more than the dominant narrative. It is up to us to be willing to learn the history we aren't told about. Thank you.
Okay, during the trip, we saw and heard stories of people that reminded us of the persistent widow and the unjust judge in Luke 18. The people we thought were similar to the judge were the people part of the Ku Klux Klan and people who were against the civil rights movement, and many high officials in the South that were corrupt, like the judge. Some examples of that corruption were presidents who would expel students for attending prayer visuals or protests, especially at Jackson State University in Mississippi, which has a high percentage of students that were people of color. Bosses fired people from jobs for the same exact reason, or when they tried to register to vote, they were denied and fired. Also, police did not protect civil rights allies. They sprayed people with fire hoses when they were protesting peacefully, unjustly arresting people, and sometimes were directly responsible for their deaths. There were also some people of color or white allies that were allegiant to the KKK because they feared for their life.
During the pilgrimage, I heard stories of people who fought back against injustices. These stories remind me of the persistent widow going back to the judge. One example of these are the Freedom Riders, which are right allies and people of color who rode on non-segregated buses to the South, and after setting foot in Jackson, Mississippi, they were arrested. The Freedom Riders knew that they would be arrested. Despite that, they decided to ride together. Another example is the Tougaloo 9, where 9 students organized a peaceful, nonviolent sit-in at the local white-only library. They fought against separate but equal because the white library had copies of books that their library did not. The Tougaloo 9 knew that going into a white library would cause them to be arrested, but they didn't care. They knew that the fight for justice was more important. It is in times of trouble that we have to take a stand. If the persistent widow only went to the judge one time to ask him for justice, would she have been granted justice? The persistent widow had to keep going to the judge, demanding for her justice. We can't believe something can be done only because we tried it one time. We have to keep trying until we see a change.
Luke 18, 4-5, part of the parable of the persistent widow, says, "For some time he refused. But finally the unjust judge said to himself, 'Even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't eventually come and attack me.' Through the persistence of this widow, the judge eventually helped her. This kind of persistence was a trademark of the civil rights movement. The leaders and activists of the civil rights movement all had this kind of persistence. On our first day, we toured the home of Medgar Evers, a field secretary of the NAACP, one of the primary organizations in the civil rights movement, who was assassinated after he arrived home. Evers knew that he was a target for white supremacists, making his children run drills to get to safe places in the house in case it was shot up. He knew his life was in danger, but he still worked to bring about change.
Another place we noticed this was the stories of Freedom Summer. During Freedom Summer, a number of black and white people came to Mississippi to help black people pass literacy tests in order to vote, often involving questions such as how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, and taught how to defend yourself nonviolently. People ran these schools out of churches even when they were openly threatened. We visited a former school in Philadelphia, Mississippi with Leroy Clemens, a former president of NAACP. He told us some of the violence that occurred there. 20 members of the KKK lynched 3 instructors from these schools, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner. They were prosecuted, and many only received small sentences. However, 40 years later, after much persistence, the man who orchestrated the killings, who was tried but never convicted, was brought to justice.
There were many other stories of persistence in the civil rights movement, from the year-long Montgomery bus boycott to the multiple attempts to march from Selma to Montgomery. It is impossible not to see God in all of this. Many congregations of churches, as well as just people, joined together to protest for their rights. The persistence of Medgar Evers and the community of Philadelphia shows the deep faith people had in justice in the civil rights movement. Through all of this persistence, God was there.
Luke 18:6 says this, "And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they will get justice quickly. Get justice and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?"
Integration. In 1954, the court case Brown versus Board of Education took place. It decided that schools having them segregated but equal was not actually equal. Because black students were feeling inferior. So they declared that schools need to integrate. People didn't want to integrate, so they didn't listen until they were made, or it happened naturally. They were made by being bused to school, or from Mr. Leroy was saying that in Mississippi, they started integration in 1970.
The Voting Rights Act was signed into law in 1965. This made it possible for minorities to vote without the unfairness that had been set in place before, like literacy tests and asking how many suds were in a bar of soap. Again, Luke 18:8 asks if the Son of Man will find faithfulness on earth, implying that, while justice may be given, it will be a challenge to maintain. Examples of this were plentiful throughout the civil rights movement. One example can be seen in the aftermath of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, which stated that separate but equal was inherently unequal, meaning schools couldn't be segregated. To get around this, white, wealthy families chose to pay for their children to receive a private education that most black families couldn't afford. While justice was technically provided, nothing had really changed. This verse is still relevant today, as the ability for everyone to vote that people fought so hard for is being challenged.
I wonder if we can give them a round of applause because they're just so cool. It was truly an honor for me to participate in the trip alongside the youth. They were just incredible the whole time. And I'm gonna get emotional, I'm sorry. As someone who teaches about violence and is an activist, I seek out young people like those who just spoke to you because they are now, and they are our future. And so I'm really grateful to hear from them. I need to move this down. The injustices that we witnessed in the civil rights movement and prior to that have not ended. Sure, there was the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and there was integration, but as of this moment, there are still many injustices that continue. I'm going to name a couple of facts about Black Americans specifically, but before I share those, I want to just share the percentage of Black Americans in the United States. There are about 349 million people within the US, and African Americans make up 13%, just under 13%. It's like 12 point something percent. Of that percentage, the majority of those incarcerated are Black men and boys. The United States has some of the greatest incarceration rates in the world, and the majority of people that are incarcerated are Black men and boys. In addition to this, Black men and boys are at higher risk for being murdered by police and other people. And so slavery has ended, there is integration, but we see that this continues in different forms. Violence against Black women and girls also continues. Black women and girls are the second highest population at risk for being domestically abused, for being sexually violated, for being murdered. The only population who is at greater risk are Native American women and girls. And that also has roots in colonization. There's also economic injustices that persist to today. For every $1 a Black person has, a white person has $10. And this is part of the results of the lack of justice that came, even though there was the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And as of recently, I hope we are all aware that in the past year and a half or so, there has been efforts to redistrict, which minimizes the Black votes, and the Voting Rights Act was also recently gutted by the Supreme Court. This has grave impacts on our collective future. This history that we had the honor of learning about and walking on sacred ground where Black bodies were beaten and where people were lynched, that history continues. That is not just history of the South or history for African Americans. This is history that is our history. We have a place in this. This is our personal and familial history, and we have something to do here. I would encourage us to be bothersome like the widow, be persistent, be annoying. I am annoying, I am bothersome, and I accept it. And I would encourage us all to embrace that in the name of justice. Historically, Mennonites have pursued justice to the death. That is one of the reasons I chose to call myself a Mennonite, was because of the persistence of Mennonites throughout history. It's something that I love, it's something that I appreciate. And so I encourage us to be bothersome, to be annoying, and to be persistent. Ali is gonna say something, and then we have a prayer to end with.
I'm back again. We have a few calls to action for you. Reckoning with your individual, familial, and collective history. Lamenting what is not right. Supporting Black and other minority-owned businesses. Participating in civil rights movements and voting.
Now, if you would turn to Voices Together 1058, Ali and I will alternate. If you could just read along in silent with us or pray with us as we read this. Again, Voices Together 1058, 1058. May God bless you with a restless discontent about easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may seek truth boldly and love deep within your heart.
May God bless you with holy anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation for people, so that you may work tirelessly for justice, freedom, and peace.
May God bless you with the gift of tears to shed with all who suffer from pain, rejection, and starvation, so that you may reach out to bring comfort and transform pain into joy.
May God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you really can make a difference in this world, so that you are able, with God's grace, to do what others claim cannot be done.
Thank you.